Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to my World of Darkness, where tonight we're going over the next level, the next installment of Thicker Than Water. Things are starting to get a little hairy with everything that's going on in the game right now. We have a lot of stuff happening. And tonight, I actually tried to take things back a little bit to stop just pushing and pushing and pushing all the major plot stuff on the characters, and I let them do what they were going to do. However, we do have 8 scenes that we had going on this past week, and some of them got pretty interesting, to say the least. But a lot of plot line also got handled. So I do have some notes, so I'm going to be looking off to the side because there was a lot going on this week, and yeah, I guess I'm just going to tell you what I got and then tell you exactly what was going on in the game while it happened. Our first scene opened up with the retainers of Lorenzo that he sent to Teeny's the night before, sitting in his office waiting for them to get back. Now there was a lot of little kid in the principal's office vibes coming from these two, like they knew they were in trouble. So yeah, they pretty much had gone to Teeny's, asked to speak with Teeny, to the manager, to the owner of the place, were invited inside, and then they just lost the ability to do anything after that. It turns out that they have actually been sitting in Lorenzo's office since like noon. The moment they woke up, they came in, and they have been waiting for their boss to get there. After some trying to get information out of them and them not really just knowing what to say, because a lot of it was just like, I'm sorry, we have no idea what happened. One of them gave Lorenzo a pink napkin, a pink cocktail napkin, that had the words, "I only deal with the boss," written on it. Lorenzo actually thought that was really funny, and then he put those 2 particular retainers on driving detail. Not really mad at them, but also not really being able to not punish them for not being able to like pull through with anything that happened with that. After he's done dealing with those 2, however, Janet, I love Janet. She's probably like one of my favorite SPCs right now. Janet comes in and gives Lorenzo 2 messages. One that just explains that a very young Asian girl came by earlier in the afternoon while the sun was still up, and dropped off a business card saying that he should call her. That is Teeny. And the other message is that Win called and asked for Lorenzo to call him at his nearest convenience because he knows he's a very busy man. Win being the mayoral-elect candidate that they're dealing with right now. Lorenzo decided to explain to Janet exactly what Win was at that point, and she was just like, you know what? I'll pick up your laundry. I'll take your messages. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Stop telling me sci-fi stuff. And that was pretty much her own way of handling that thing. Just saying that she is just not willing to. She's like, she understands she works for a vampire, but otherworldly beings from a different dimension is not something that she really wants to handle. Right as things were starting to calm down, though, Tinia's character said that she needed to call Lorenzo. So she called, which actually kind of was kind of funny. Janet put her on hold with That's Amore playing in the background, just being as stereotypical as possible. And Janet looks over and goes, "You have the Baron of the Anarchs on line 2 at your convenience." And then leaves. She gets the hell out of there, does not want any more to do with what's going on with that tonight. Things are just getting a little too heavy. Tinia, on the other hand, however, was calling Lorenzo to set up another meeting with him and Nick at the pagoda in the Rose Gardens as soon as possible to go over the information that was on Nick's clipboard, because they finally got that stuff. And yeah, there was some information on there. Now, scene 2 at the pagoda. Tinia, Lorenzo, and Nick met up, and they discussed the information that is on Nick's clipboard and how it says that he's been infected with something that is designed to target the Kindred population. Nick talks about his past. He actually goes in detail saying how he was captured, what he was before he was embraced, and basically how this whole thing happened on his in his perception. They decide to quarantine Nick because what's going on is they found out that he's infected with this fungus that seems to be targeting Kindred. And something in his clipboard also said that for some reason, Nick would be the perfect candidate to distribute, even if he doesn't know what's going on. They are basically going to take him and drop him off in a heavily populated Kindred area and just let things happen at that point. So he may be a ticking time bomb as it is, but they have decided to quarantine him in a nice hotel. So they're going to quarantine him at this hotel, and then they're also going to deliver him blood bags and not let him feed off anyone, because they're not really exactly sure how this stuff is fed from. If people drink from him, which seems the most obvious, they could get infected with this stuff. If he bites someone, they could become infected. If that's the case, if somebody else feeds off that person, they'd infect that next vampire. Perhaps him using disciplines on someone could possibly cause infection. Like, there's really no telling exactly what's going on with this. But that does bring into mind that Nick knows that he has used his discipline on 2 individuals in the Hecata thus far, and they now may be at risk. One, Daniela. Dan of the Dead has had his discipline used on her. The other one being Paul Milliner, who doesn't even really know that he used disciplines on them. But he did, and therefore Paul could very well be at risk. The idea, though, that they're working with right now is they might be able to find a way to decontaminate Nick. Hopefully, that would be nice. They also decide to get Pete involved in this. Pete is also Hecata. He is the city's coroner, and he probably is the best person to talk to about this kind of thing. But getting his expert medical opinion is going to be helpful. They also decide that they're going to have to try to get a hold of a Nosferatu and ask them about what the clipboard says, because the clipboard actually says that there are samples stolen from what they called a Nosferatu warren, used to make the fungus that they infected him with susceptible to vampires, or make vampires susceptible to the fungus. So after their meeting there, Lorenzo contacts Valentino and has him meet him at the last drop. Lorenzo, on the way to the last drop, then calls Richard Wynn, who wants to work with the Puttanesca on purchasing a customized van for a future project. There's some back and forth jokes about how that's fine. We'll get you one that says free candy on the side of it. And there's some joking back and forth. It's really nice to see that the Hecata and the Bane are getting together so well. He also says that he wants to help to update Lorenzo's personal security. He understands that Lorenzo deals in security, but having something that's stronger than the regular is typically what Lorenzo provides. Therefore, having something stronger than that would come in handy. He tells Lorenzo that he would like him to meet up with his captain of security. That the guy is a little rude, but try to be polite to him because he is not 100% human. After some back and forth, it is decided that he is some type of shifter. And Lorenzo just says, well, that's nice. I like to keep my dogs in order. So we will see exactly how that goes at some point if Lorenzo decides to contact this security captain. And see exactly what kind of shifter this Bane might be working with. There was another reason for Wynn to contact Lorenzo, but he said he was not quite ready for that he needs to get his presentation board in order before he goes into that. So we do have some more stuff on that coming up in the future. Now, the next scene takes place at the last drop, where we'll start off with Jay sitting at a table filing down the triggers to guns. So he's doing his his shady stuff. Now, Daviga has been playing Jay for a few weeks now, and he's been going about this in a very strange way. Now, I know that there hasn't been much actions happening for me to tell you about when it comes to Jay doing things, but the fact is, he's sending me all of his actions via text. There are things happening that he's just trying to keep on the down low. He's trying to play the long game. And he's doing some really interesting stuff that will most likely end up affecting game later. So just keep in mind, Jay is here. He's just working in the background and doing his stuff without anybody else knowing exactly what he's up to. Now, in the bar, we have Griffin, Miles, Duke, DePaul, and sitting with Vincent DePaul is Marcus. These two elders. Now, Marcus is my Zamitzi, who is still here from the last time because he's waiting for Tinia to take the time to have a walk around the territory with him. That's literally all he wants. But right now he's sitting with her grandsire having a very interesting discussion in French. When Tinia arrives and is curious to find Val in the bar as well, he lets her know that Lorenzo is coming. They wanted to meet there. Tinia tries to find a local nos and decides to try reaching out eventually to Rebecca, which is a Nosferatu she met during her coronation. She's also part of the Children of the Angel, which is part of the Nephilim cult that is located in the city, that has been long-term in the city, but they don't do much. They kind of just keep to themselves and try to stay out of people's way as much as possible. So when Lorenzo arrives and approaches Val, asking if Nick has ever used his discipline on him, he's being a little loud. There's almost a dozen humans inside this bar, and the partition that keeps the Anarch hangout area, the private club of the Last Drop, closed is wide open. And the Hecata just come in here and start talking as if there is nothing to even think about. No masquerade in mind whatsoever. Tinia pretty much is losing her shit over this. At first she's just trying to tell them to be quiet, trying to tell them to find another place for the conversation, and they just will not stop. And since they do not stop, Tinia, being the Bruja she is, loses control. And we actually have a near disaster happen at the Last Drop. Jokes of, we're going to have to build this place again. Stuff came up. But what ended up happening was when she was about to actually frenzy, Marcus stands up and yells something in a language she does not know. It's Lithuanian. Marcus speaks Lithuanian. But he yells something at her using Quell the Beast. This is the second time a Zamitzi of this family has used Quell the Beast on Tinia to completely dissipate. He wanted to see her still go at things, but he wanted her to be in control and to not cause problems. So, as she's starting to calm down, Miles shuts the partition door between the Anarch meeting area and the rest of the bar, and Tinia calms down. Lorenzo and Valentino decide to have the conversation in Lorenzo's car, and Lorenzo shows Nick's paperwork, because at this point everybody has just made copies of this clipboard's files and are just passing it around to everybody, which is just so great. They decide that Nick should be quarantined at Valentino's funeral home, because at that point he can go in a basement basically where Valentino havens. Miles then talks with Tinia about how, aside from all the weird stuff that's going on in the city, the actual Anarch politics need to be handled or a war could break out between the gangs. There's a lot of stuff going on concerning the fact that no one has decided to set boundaries. No one has decided just where gang lines are actually drawn, and things are starting to heat up. Tinia's been busy with other things, but unfortunately these little things eventually just chip away at the foundations. Miles also informs Tinia that the Anarch population is just getting too big, and if those turf lines are not drawn up, then something really bad is going to go down. The big issue that this happened is after they kicked all the Camarilla out, there was an influx of Anarchs, and also Camarilla who just didn't want to leave. So there are a lot more Kindred in Portland than there should be at the moment, and no one has even been able to take a proper census. One of Miles's points that he makes to her is that trying to do anything to organize at all makes it look like we're the damn Camarilla. Once you try to organize, it's not anarchy anymore, so people start to flip out. Miles seems to be teetering on the fence of whether or not he thinks the movement can actually work in the long run. So while this is happening, we can go ahead and jump over to the other scene that's happening at Valentino's funeral home. Michael leaves for his own personal safety. Michael is Michael Pisanob. He's actually one of Lorenzo's cousins, but he's still human. And once he realizes that there's somebody coming in that has a pathogen, he just goes, you know what, call me when it's safe to come back to work. And he leaves. So Lorenzo, Nick, and then Peter gather at Valentino's place with Valentino. And there's discussion about concerns that about Nick's blood being drawn. Nick is afraid that the other vampires may lose themselves if they smell his blood. So he ends up taking his own blood samples in a freezer and then giving them to Pete. They contact Daniela and inform her on the situation, and she comes in for blood testing as well. We ended up having Abilene, who is Tinia's player, who also played Daniela, bring Daniela in for a small conversation, and it was nice. It was really nice. I enjoy the banter and the playfulness between Nick and Daniela. I think he sees her as kind of like a little sister and just wants to make sure that she's taken care of. And since when they first met, she was like injured in a way he didn't even purely comprehend. He kind of has like almost like a Florence Nightingale effect on like, I need to take care of this. Like, this one is not ready for existence in the night yet. Now, something interesting happens here also. For those of you who have been listening since the beginning, you'll know that I ran Thicker Than Water, this plotline, in the old Laws of the Night, 2nd edition revised LARP system, going on 20 years ago. This was a lot of fun for me. It was the first time that I ever really told a story, and I fell in love with the process, and I fell in love with the story. And a lot of these NPCs are characters that I have been working on and growing for over 2 decades at this point. When I brought in Pete, he was the son of the mayor of Portland at that time. It was 20 years ago. So I built this character to be a young college student at the time. He's the mayor. He's the son of Tom Potter, the fictional son of Tom Potter. Tom Potter's real. This kid is not. If he has a son named Pete, why would you name your kid Pete Potter? But when I invented him originally, when I brought this character into play, he was human, and he was a classmate. He was a classmate of one of the other players who was a vampire who was still attending college. So with how detailed I am and needing to know exactly who all my characters are, I invented this guy who had this long list of classes he was attending, and he took etymology, which is the study of insects. So when he starts reading on Nick's stuff, he knows what this stuff is. He knows how it works. He's done papers on this thing, which is the actual true fungus that is truly devastating to the cicada population, which, tells you why Nick's was codenamed Cicada. But so it was just really funny to have this come up. I rolled dice to see if he would know anything, and yeah, he did know. He knows about bugs, so he was able to tell them that the fungus is there to cause infertility in cicadas. The idea that the SI had come up with was they were going to take this fungus that is something that cicadas have to deal with that cause them to be infertile, make it so that it can be basically implanted into a vampire who will spread it and cause it so that anybody who gets infected by this stuff can no longer embrace. The idea of just, if we can't kill all the vampires at first, let's make sure that they can't make any more. It's kind of clever, but it's also a really scary thing because we're looking at a blood pathogen that Kindred have to deal with, and they don't know the full results to how it spreads. They eventually do Daniela's blood work, and Pete lets them know that there's nothing wrong with her blood. So it appears that using disciplines on other vampires does not cause a spread of this pathogen. They're still trying to get a hold of Paul just to make sure, because having more than one test on this is probably the best bet. Nick's a little wary about them testing the blood. He tells them if you have to test this blood, try not to do it in open air. We want to make sure that you cannot smell this because it's going to drive you insane if you do. Now, when that happens, Nick finally comes out about what's everything that's going on. When he explains to them he doesn't want them to breathe in his blood, he tells them straight out, he's like, look, I'm very sorry. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm not a caitiff. I'm a salubri. And he goes into this long thing explaining exactly what that is. He opens his eye and freaks the hell out of everyone. And it was interesting. I like the idea of having a character who has this great secret but has been able to find somebody that he can open up to about it. He actually feels very relieved that he could tell the Hecata what's going on. And since they've been protecting him all this time, he does have a little bit of trust in the fact that they will keep his secret. And he explains that the thing that he does is he heals. He can heal the mind and body. And that most of the reason why everybody goes after him is because of hundreds of years of a smear campaign from the Tremere. But they explain to them that it might not be something that he has to worry about. The Tremere are so much weaker now. They've taken so much of a hit in the last couple decades that there's a good chance that he may be able to be rid of the stigma of being a salubri. So while all that is going on, and he explains everything that he can about his past and the clan and all that stuff, Miles is going off to Tinia about how the Anarchs just will not work long term. And in the middle of that rant, Tinia's phone rings. And it's Fiorenza Savannah on the other end. Fiorenza reached out to Tinia when she was in Chicago months ago, and she has not heard from her since. Now, she's trying, what she says to Tinia anyway, is she's trying to change the Ivory Tower. That she sees it as a boys' club, that it's misogynistic, and that it needs to change with the times, that this dark age institution does not fit into the world any longer. And she thinks that the Anarchs are going to be what help with that. And she explains that the reason she hasn't contacted in so long is because she's been busy helping to clean up the issue that Vannevar Thomas and the Society of Leopold have started in California and trying to clean that stuff up. Also warning Tinia about the red gas. And if there are true SI in the city, or if they end up dealing or making the SI know that there's situations going on with vampires, that they could very well pull this little secret weapon out, and it could cause a lot of problems for the vampires. Now, she also offers up help. She lets Tinia know that with everything that's on her plate, with the situation, that if she needs help, she is there to help her. And that Savannah, that Fiorenza is going to send a messenger before the sun rises tonight with a dossier explaining to her exactly what Fiorenza is willing to do to help. Out of game terms, out of character terms, what I've done is I told Abilene that she can spend her XP on anything she wants on the Fiorenza Savannah lore sheet. I actually felt really bad about this because this has been in the plans, like, this has been in the works for a long time. This is something that I've been wanting to do. I wanted to bring Fiorenza into this, and when I actually had decided how this was going to happen, when Tinia took charge and became the Anarch Baron, I had decided that this was the road I was going to take. And then shortly after that, one of my other players, David, who plays Valentino, asked me if he could take it, and I had to turn him down. I told him there's plot reasons. I do plan on using the lore sheet, but I always feel bad telling somebody no when they want to have something and it's something that they're specifically interested in. But since he has like ties in Mexico, it would be a good idea for his character to have the stuff, and there's a lot of different reasons why he wanted it, but like I had already had these plans in the works, so I kind of felt bad about that. Now, another thing that Fiorenza tells her is that she's trying to build up something new. She wants to bring the Camarilla to the next point and be more fair. She explains that where she is in charge as a chairman of the board, not really a prince. The Camarilla recognizes her as a prince, but she's more of a premier. She's more of the head of a board, and that all the clans have full representations, very much like a Primogen Council, but they don't take like stock in the fact that somebody might be a thin blood. That if there's a clan there, they get representation. If there is some type of outcasts in society, they try to make sure that they have a fair share in things too. They handle things on almost more of a conclave basis. And she says that she wants to call this the Neftali. Now, for those of you who are in the know already, I'm sorry, I like to do this stuff all the time, but the Neftali was brought up in the Gehenna books by Jan Petersen. I personally have a theory, if you you might hear about it very soon, that I think that Petersen is connected to Fiorenza in some fashion. But I wanted to bring the idea of the Neftali from the Gehenna books. Basically, a group, a subsect of the Camarilla that has better intentions, quote unquote. I'm not really sure what I think about Fiorenza as of yet. I do think she's out for herself, obviously. She's a vampire and a Ventru. But I do think that she might have a better idea of how to run things in a modern world than the standard Camarilla does. Anyway, after she mentions the fact that she's willing to help out Tinia with the situation, she just abruptly hangs off, which allows Miles to go back into his tangent about how the Anarchs just don't work the way that they want them to, and they discuss finding proper Anarch titles and possibly and also doing turf locations. They actually had a good idea with a lot of them. So there's mostly 4 basic titles within the Anarchs. There's the Baron, which we have Tinia. Then there's the Emissary, which is effectively the same way that a Harpy or a Herald works in the Camarilla. And they're trying to figure out who exactly is going to be great for that one. The head running on that is being Colin Griffin, working on that, because he's kind of like a little socialite butterfly Bruja as it is, and he might really do well. A sweeper is a person who their duty is effectively simple. If I read directly what it says he walks around and observes other vampires on Anarch territory, recording names and faces where possible, attributes, abilities, clan, ancestry, and anything else that they can discover. The Baron themselves prefers to call a vampire who holds this position a counter or even a census taker. But most Anarchs use the term sweeper, proctor, a Sherlock, even on occasion an abacus. So this is a character that would be keeping track of the census and how many vampires of what clans are where. And that really would help out this city. And then the other one is a chameleon. This is a person who pretends to be Camarilla. And at this point in time, the person that Tinia is thinking might be the best idea for a chameleon could very well be our dear Camarilla Toreador John, the child of Anaroma, who just seems to want to keep to himself. But he also runs that business where a lot of vampires come and go, and he seems to want to stay out of politics. So they might be able to work with him, but it really depends on how much he's truly avoiding at this point. After Miles finally got finished jabbing at her about politics, which unfortunately had to happen, the next thing that happens is Tinia has a wonderful little conversation with Marcus. Marcus, who's been waiting for her for a while anyway. But they separate from DePaul. They have a conversation, and Marcus tells her straight out he completely understands. He knows how it is to be high up in the political ladder in a city. He was a bishop, after all, in the Sabbat. She asks him why he laughed the way that he did at her coronation when Christian Faith showed up. And he tells her that he just didn't expect to see Christian in that light. He explains that Christian, when he was Sabbat, was their pack priest, that they were in a pack together. And it's just always interesting seeing someone who you shared a Vinculum Radiant with and then hadn't seen in a very long time, and just didn't expect Christian to go in that direction. He explains a lot of different things about how, like, you need to consider the fact that spirituality was a massive part of the Sabbat at one point, and where there are many violent members of the Sabbat, obviously, but Christian was a strict fighter, but he was also very much the morale booster for the pack. So seeing him work with the Church of Cain is interesting. He gives her a lot of advice about how to basically run a city, but he's giving it to her in like almost a Sabbat point of view. But he does tell her that he understands that things are just a little too heavily built up right now, and that he and his brood will leave the city, and then he will come back at some point in time when things calm down, possibly, or when things are worse, to get that walk and that proper talk in. He tells her that since he is leaving, 3 Tzimisce will be leaving the city, leaving her with 4. She knows about 3. She knows about Ivan Vassell, Ivan Vassell's child Toulouse Vivaldi, and she knows about Christoph Constantine, who owns the Impaler Inc. salon. She has no idea who this 4th one is, but Marcus assures her that in his day sleep, as he reaches out while he's underground and senses everything that's going on in the city, he assures her that he does not know who he is, but he does know that there's a 4th Tzimisce in this city that she should probably find out about. Marcus then has a very nice goodbye with Vincent de Paul, and they basically say that they will kill each other later in the future, and they both look forward to their next meeting. These two are very long-standing rivals, and they like each other. It's a game at this point that these two elders are constantly trying to trip each other up. Lorenzo and Valentino decide after they're done at the funeral home, that they are going to go to Tini's to find out exactly what happened with Lorenzo's retainers. They get in. They ask to talk to the owner of the place, and I'm just going to go ahead and say that they were threatened, and there's very high chances of a Hecata versus Thin Blood clan war in our near future. They also found out that there's a lot more, possibly 24 or so, Thin Bloods in the city who, it was pretty bad. They got taken upstairs to Tini's office, where Michael, her big old bodyguard that she has, it takes a little swig out of his drink, and his skin seems to turn to stone. Tini takes a drink out of hers, and her eyes start to glow red, and she's able to basically snap a small burst of flame out of her fingertips. And she tells them that they want to make this conversation quick because she needs to get some sleep because she has a 10 a.m. yoga class that she wants to go to. As Lorenzo kept trying to threaten through everything, she kept saying that, well, I'm just going to handle this at noon. Like, we'll just handle this during the daytime. This isn't a big deal for us. But I think that there was a bit of a slight understanding that Teeny may be able to help with like witness relocation and stuff using profane Heros Gamos on anybody who needs to get out of the city or does not want to leave the city but should. But everything did pretty much just leave on a little bit of a threat that the Thin Bloods just were not going to pay no matter what. And then for some reason also it got into the idea of maybe they can teach Paul Milliner blood alchemy. So that seems to be interesting. I wonder exactly if this is going to end up being a friendly thing or if we might actually see a Hecata versus Thin Blood clan war. In our very last scene for the night, Tinia went and saw Del. Delphi is the Malkavian psychic that Merrick had used forever, who lives in St. John's City, is just over the bridge from Portland. And Del warns her that things are at a breaking point in the city. And that close things are more dangerous than outside things. Del talks about cracks in the foundations. That the greatest threat in the greatest threat in the city does not seem to be seeing itself as a threat. That things that think they are doing the best could be causing the biggest issues. That there's a shadow looming over that could blot out the sun. Of course, there's jokes about, and not in a good way. He also says that there's a shadow that seems to have lost its way and could actually be helpful if it was to find the right path, or cause a lot of harm if it didn't. We ended the game off right about there because there's just so much going on, and with the way that the city is going, we don't know exactly where the confrontation is going to come from. We've got Thin Bloods and Hecata having some kind of tussle. We've got the Fomore, mayor of Portland. There's a lot that's going to come up, and I can't wait to see what happens next. But I guess you guys will find out shortly after I do. So thank you for joining me. This is My World of Darkness, and I will see you next time. Good evening.